Anyway, I think uh, good afternoon, uh, Professor Kakwani,
Good
my
afternoon.
colleagues and friends. I think there is reason to believe that the policy makers of the present generation could take a lot more pride than their previous generation, particularly in the count that the current generation of policymakers have been able to accomplish what is often we wanted to achieve, higher rate of economic growth.
Mhm.
So we have during the last 3 to 4 decades or even 5 decades, one could see economies recording remarkably high growth rate, particularly by to begin with by the East Asian countries, which were basically small countries. But later, even economies of continental size like China and followed by India recording growth rate, which was never ever heard in the history of economies. So China has something like 9.6% growth rate record over 40 years. So to that extent, the policymakers of the current generation have learned the art of cooking high growth rate. But there came the real problem. The prosperity that this high growth contributed has not been shared equitably, or rather shared in such a manner which is not at all acceptable to any concerned society. As a result, you have a situation wherein a growing divide between countries, within countries, and growing inequality, and of course, poverty, of course, China has been able to contribute to a great extent reducing poverty, but the inequality has come to the fore. And it is here the relevance of the contribution by the speaker of today, an eminent academician of international repute who had his earlier training in India in Delhi School of Economics. He had his PhD in 67 from Delhi School of Economics. And he had an impeccable academic record, publication record of almost 9 publications in econometric, to say the least. And he has published in almost all the published by his books were published by almost all reputed international publishers. So, sir, I think the concern that you are going to raise today in terms of prices, indirect tax, and poverty, to my mind, the highly unacceptable situation that we are placed in to a great deal to deal with prices. But at the same time, there is also need to be an equal concern about the creation of value and the so-called, I may even quote Mariana Mazzucato in terms of the difference between making and taking of value in the modern economy. I think the point which you are going to raise in terms of prices could lead to poverty. I would even use the term what is one could even talk about catastrophic inflation, inflationary tendencies leading people to poverty. So, and I think your reflection today and your willingness to join us today is very much appreciated by all of us in a particular juncture wherein my own colleagues are working on a number of issues relating to GST in the country. And some of them are concerned about the performance of GST collection and its determinants. Other group is working on this impact on prices, poverty, etc., etc. And I think there could not have an appropriate time for us engaged, and also particularly at the current juncture in the policy discourse, your presentation is very important. So I warmly welcome you to the GIFT community. And also, I think it is going to be only a beginning of a long journey that we would like to have with you, and we look forward to your guidance and participation in all the academic activities of GIFT. And I'm sure you will be with us. With these words, I welcome you once again most warmly on behalf of the GIFT community and all those who are present here. And I request you to share your thoughts of the day with us. Thank you very much. And I'm extremely happy that my colleague Zakaria has connected you with GIFT. I think Zakaria is, he's a very dynamic young colleague of mine. And yeah, I think I'm sure we are going to have a very fruitful and mutually beneficial journey from today onwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the director. I'm very delighted to be meeting you all. Would have been better to meet you face to face, but I'm meeting you virtually. This is the second best thing, but I'm still very delighted. I have a very fond memory of Kerala. Almost 40 years ago, I went to attend a conference in K.N. Raj Institute. And I was very impressed with the country. The beautiful, Kerala is very beautiful, and I still cherish the memories. And maybe one day I will visit Kerala again. So let me start the lecture now. Now, we talked about the economic growth in India. I mean, India used to have Hindu rate of growth, which was about not more than 3% total growth rate, and population was increasing about 2%. So the net growth for 40, 50 years was about 1%. So the standard of living didn't improve very rapidly. But then things changed in 1990s, and then India became a different country. So so when we have a growth, how do we in some publication, I have defined how do we measure economic growth. But let me discuss the traditional definition that economic growth is the additional activities which takes place in economy. So economy produces thousands of goods and services every day, or even every hour. So outputs so created are ultimately consumed by people. So they make their purchasing decision based on market prices. So the market prices play a crucial role in people's lives. Now, people have different circumstances and consumption patterns. So the impact of prices on people's life will be different from one person to another. And particularly, I'm concerned about the people who are unable to meet their basic needs. They are the most vulnerable to price increases. So price increases or inflation can have a significant impact on poverty. So in this lecture, I will explore this relationship between prices and poverty. So there are many poverty measures. I will use the entire class of additive separable poverty measures, including most popular measure of poverty, which is head count ratio. So I like to capture the impact of prices on poverty through poverty elasticity of poverty. I mean, this concept of how to calculate poverty elasticity with respect to prices, I worked on this, about 10 years ago. And so this is a new idea that through elasticities, I capture, and these elasticities can be computed from household surveys, from actual real data. So in this lecture, I will propose a pro-poor price index to analyze the impact of prices of various goods and services on poverty. Because consumption patterns differ, the poor consumption pattern of the poor is very different from those of the non-poor. So how to measure the impact of different price increases of different commodities on poverty? Now, also I will touch upon, I won't go into details of indirect taxes in India, the GST, which is a very popular topic, and I hear that your institute is actively engaged in studying the GST in India. It's a very complex issue. And to get to it, basically what we are doing is that these indirect taxes, they impact the prices. And then this lecture is about how these changes in prices impact the poverty. So that is the linkage that we can analyze the impact of indirect taxes on poverty. And also, but I'm not focusing too much on GST because I'm not an expert in this area. I haven't done any practical work in this area. But this lecture is more general lecture on prices, whereas indirect taxes, in my view, is an application of what I'm going to present to you. So I have developed in this, I will present to you the price index for the poor, which I call it PIP, P-I-P. In this, the weights which I use, every price index has weights. So weight I used are the price elasticity of poverty, that you select a poverty measure and then you calculate its elasticity and then use that elasticity as weights in the price index. This is a new idea and I'm trying on you. Let's see how I would like to have feedback from you. Now, so first we have to define, we have to take a poverty measure. Now, since the publication of very famous article by Amartya Sen in Econometrica, there has been enormous literature on poverty measures. And before that, headcount measure, or percentage of poor, was the most popular index, which Sen calls it a very crude measure of poverty, because he proposed a couple of actions saying that if income of a poor is decreased, then poverty must increase. Or similarly, if some income is transferred from poor to the rich, then poverty must increase. So head count ratio does not satisfy that requirement. So here I'm taking entire class of additive poverty measures, which I donate by theta. So in these slides, theta is integral of this PZX, supposing Z is the poverty line. So the PZX, the interpretation is that it is the deprivation suffered by a person with income, with given income X and poverty line Z. Z is the poverty line. So if income of that person decreases and poverty line remains the same, then PZ must increase. So the deprivation, if the income of the person or her income is less than the poverty line, she suffers deprivation. But if her income is greater than poverty line, then she doesn't suffer any deprivation, it is zero. So if you aggregate all these deprivation, you get a class of these poverty measures, theta. Now, these poverty measures are important, but there was an important article published in 1984, Foster, Greer, and Thorbach. And that changed very much. That was quite different from the idea suggested by Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen's idea was to capture the relative deprivation in poverty measurement, whereas here it does not capture the relative deprivation. That people's consumption depends on their own consumption. It's not impacted by the consumption of other people in the society. Where the Sen's poverty measure, the income of other people also impacts the poverty. So, but using that idea of relative deprivation, which Sen introduced, things become very complicated and difficult to compute. And people were not using in practical situations. Many people were not using Sen's poverty measure. But this FGT measure, Foster, Greer, and Thorbach, they're additive separable, and they don't capture relative deprivation, but they are additive and they have very elegant properties. So these measures became very popular. So this is a class of poverty measures. So alpha is sort of a measure of inequality aversion. And when alpha is equal to 0, this theta becomes head count ratio, percentage of poor, which is the well-known poverty measure. When alpha is equal to 1, then it is a poverty gap ratio. How much is the gap of average gap from the poverty line of the society? So it measures, it gives you the idea. It is a combination of two ideas, head count ratio, and also how much is the gap, mean gap from the poverty line. And then third is when alpha is equal to 2, we get severity of poverty, which also is sensitive to when income is transferred from rich to poor or poor to the rich. If it is transferred from poor to rich, the poverty increases. If rich to the poor, poverty decreases. So this is the framework I will use. All three measures, head count ratio, poverty gap ratio, and severity of poverty. But my methodology is general enough that it can be applied to any poverty measure, including that of Sen. So, okay. Now, having decided upon what the poverty measures we use, now next idea I want to introduce you, the money metric utility. The utility in price indices, they use the consumer theory to derive, many brilliant economists have worked on deriving the consumer price indices using the consumer theory. Now, in this consumer theory, we assume that there is some upside.
Kawani. Nanaka kakawani.
Hello?
No, please go ahead. I think some.
Oh, okay. Okay. So this utility utility theory makes the assumption that every consumer maximizes the utility subject to some budget constraint. Now, utility is a very big concept. Huh? I mean, what does it mean? I mean, does it mean happiness, satisfaction people get by consuming goods, things, they consume, they get some satisfaction. So it's in my view, it's an abstract concept that utility, it's not happiness. It is not the satisfaction, because it's a very narrow, concept that you derive the utility by consuming a certain amount of goods and services. Oh, shit. Okay. So it is but it is very widely used, particularly in the theory of index numbers. So this is what I will be using in my presentation. Now, the idea of money metric utility, that as I pointed out, that utility is a very obscure concept. But when people know how much is the cost of enjoying certain amount of utility, they get a better idea that how much expenditure you need, how much minimum expenditure you need to enjoy amount of utility at given market prices. That is the interpretation of this money metric utility function. It is measured in monetary units. So it's a very interesting idea that people understand better how much is the cost of enjoying a given amount of utility. Utility can also be related to the standard of living people enjoy. Although Amartya Sen does not like this idea of utility function, he talks something, about functioning and capabilities. That it's not only the consumption of goods important, but in measuring well-being, there are many other factors, For instance, people may suffer, ill health, even if they consume a lot of commodities, but it's still ill health can create a lot of ill-being among the people, particularly when you are aging. So anyway, this idea is that every consumer maximizes the utility subject to budget constraint. From there, we derive Marshallian demand equation. Q is equal to QXP. This is the demand equation. Q is the quantity consumed or demanded by the consumer. And X is the total expenditure or income, and P is the prices. From here, you can solve this equation in terms of substituting Q in this utility function. You can get the indirect utility function, which is a function of total expenditure and price. Which I'm solving for in terms of U, we get the money metric utility function. X is a function of U and P. So it is the interpretation again. It is the interpretation is that what is the minimum amount of expenditure you require to enjoy U amount of utility at given prices P. So this is also called money metric utility function. Now you can see that this money metric utility is the increasing function of the higher the utility, greater is the expenditure you will require. And if utility remaining constant. If prices increase, then also you need more expenditure. So it is an increasing function of U for all P, and also is it the increasing function of prices, and when is also concave in prices. So it has a property that when all prices increase by the same amount, same amount, then it is a homogeneous function that expenditure also increases by lambda %. And this equation is derived, I'm not going to go into derivation of this, but this is the property I use in deriving the elasticity, poverty elasticity. If you have any question on this, please do interrupt me. Okay. In economics, the concern
Please.
was,
Yeah, yeah.
yep.
Please go ahead. We shall interrupt if we have got clarification. We shall do that.
Okay, okay. In economics, the people were engaged, and economists were engaged in how to find out the impact of price changes on real income. Okay, so there are two principles used: Hicks compensation variation, which you must have heard about it, and another is not compensation, but I don't remember what's the other one. Anyway, I'm using only the Hicks compensation variation. Okay, supposing this is the expenditure function. So price is P star. Supposing market prices increase is a vector, P to P star. It increases from P to P star. Then this will be the change in income, change in the real income, expenditure. So you can see that if prices increase, the expenditure required will be higher, so real income will drop. So this is the Hicks compensation variation. Other one is equivalent variation, I remember. So dx is the change in the real income when utility remains the constant, but prices are changing. So the real income that you are keeping the utility constant, only changing the prices. So this is the real income, where the effect of the change in prices on the real income. Now, for practical purpose, we can assume that elasticities of substitution are 0. We can expand this by the Taylor's expansion, and then you get the change in real income because of the prices is given by this. You expand this by the Taylor's expansion. So from this we get elasticity of the income with respect to price, PI. If ith price goes up by 1%, then the income of the consumer, real income of the consumer will decrease. The real income will decrease by. So this is equal to, actually interesting thing is minus WIPX, WIX. WI is the budget share, of a person with income X or expenditure X. This is the ith budget share, that how much income the person spends, what the proportion of income person spends on a ith commodity. So this is very interesting. This is a very interesting idea that you can now calculate the impact of real price change on the real income of anybody in the society with any income X. Okay, so in WIX you can calculate for any consumer, and you get the idea that how the price increase of a particular commodity impacts the real income of an individual. Now, this is a very interesting result. that if the highest commodity price goes up by 1%, real income declines by WIX%. So this is a very, very useful idea. Let me see why it is useful. Let me go into the next slide. Now, I want to see, people like the quintiles or deciles, when you are analyzing income inequality. The poor and rich you can define by the, the bottom decile or bottom quintile, and rich is you can classify by top quintile or top decile. Okay, so this budget share, the average budget share, you can calculate for any quintile. You can also calculate for any decile, right? So you calculate the budget share, and then you will know exactly how much is the impact of the price on people belonging to different quintiles. Whether if people belong to the bottom quintile, they are supposing you classify them as poor. So you can find out how the impact of different commodities impact their real income in different quintiles or different deciles. Actually, this idea, you can use it in measuring the indirect taxes. Okay, supposing you put a X amount of tax on some amount of tax on highest commodity, and it has an impact on prices. And those, if that prices go up, then you also know how different quintiles or different deciles are impacted by that tax rate or that indirect tax rate. So policymakers can get some idea how these different tax rates can impact the people belonging to different quintiles or different deciles. I mean, this is I think it's a very interesting idea, very simple. And supposing, so this is a WI is the WJ bar, supposing JS commodity. No, this is the JS quintile, WIJ is a JS quintile. And this is the price of the highest commodity, the percentage increase in prices. So this will give you the total impact of price change on JS quintile or JS decile. So this is very powerful in my view. This is the simplest thing idea I could think of, and it gives you very nice, very simple to calculate results. Quintiles, you can look at household survey. I mean, Zakaria is expert on household surveys, so he can very quickly and easily calculate the budget shares of different quintiles, and then you will know how much is the impact of tax rates of different commodities on people belonging to different quintiles or people belonging to different deciles. Okay. Now, but that's one way of looking at, the impact on the poor. Another is that you have a poverty line and you calculate the percentage of poor, which we call it head count ratio. So this is the head count ratio. And so FZ is the probability distribution function that the people who have income less than the poverty line. So this is the probability distribution function. So H is the FZ, the probability distribution function at the poverty line. So this is the head count ratio. So, and from this, at the poverty line, supposing UZ is the utility enjoyed by a person with income Z, poverty line. If you have a poverty line income, then UZ is your utility enjoyed by you. So this gives you the expenditure function. And if you differentiate H, you get the elasticity of head count ratio, which is Z times the FZ is the probability density function WIZ is the budget share of a person at poverty line, and H is the head count ratio. So this is the elasticity, the way you calculate the impact of increase in price of the ith commodity on head count ratio, that how it will impact the percentage of poor. Okay, so similarly, you can apply the same technology, and so all the FGT measures, all additive separable poverty measures, you can calculate these elasticities. If you are interested in derivations, I think I can send you, I have sent some document to Zakaria. He can share with you how to derive them. Yeah? But basically, the idea is that we derive them very simple way using the expenditure function. Using the expenditure function and put it in the integral and then just differentiate under the integral, it's not very complicated derivation, But so you can apply this, have a household survey, you have incomes of the households, every household, you can calculate per capita income of the every household, right? And you also know how much households are consuming different commodities, and then you can calculate the elasticity of any poverty measure. Simple. So simple that I don't know why many people brilliant people worked in this area of index numbers and poverty, in this, they didn't come out with this simple idea. So now I want to, given these elasticities, now I want to give you the total impact of all the price changes. So, so this is the sort of expenditure function, EUZ. So that you can define P, you put this, and so theta P at the price level P, this is the poverty measure at given price P. And supposing price changes from P to P star, while individual utility remains the same, the poverty measure theta will change to this. So this is a real change in poverty after adjusting for prices. So this is a real, after prices have changed. So using the Taylor's expansion again, we get a very nice result that this is a proportional change in prices, and this is the elasticity, ith elasticity of the poverty, any poverty measure, So this measures the impact of so this measures the impact of change in prices on poverty. You can calculate for, very, very simple way. Okay, so next I can proceed. Now, when ith price increases, it has two impacts. First is the income effect, and second is the distribution impact. Now, the famous Slutsky equation in consumer theory. That Slutsky equation says that the price elasticity of a commodity can be decomposed into two components. One is the income effect, and second is the substitution effect. So here actually, this looks very similar to Slutsky equation, but here I'm not talking about the substitution effect, but distribution impact. Okay, when price of the ith commodity, when all prices increase, then there's no distribution effect. There's only income effect. That is the inflation rate, which affects everybody, right? But then if price of the ith commodity increases, then it has also a redistribution and impact on the real income. So these are the two impacts, the income effect and distribution impact. So using from Hicks theory, this is the budget share of the total population. So this is the total elasticity. Now, maybe let me explain the distribution effect more. Whether, if a commodity is proportionally consumed by the poor, then ith price will have more impact on the poor than on the non-poor. But if it is a luxury item, then distribution effect will impact more the rich than the poor. Okay, so this is the way I capture whether the prices are pro-poor. If prices of the necessity goods are going up, then it will impact the poor and it will impact the poverty. But if prices of the luxury goods are only going up, then it will impact the rich, but poor will be less impacted by it. So this is the way we define pro-poor prices, which are the pro-poor prices and which are not pro-poor prices. So the total effect, if all prices increases, this is the elasticity when all prices increases, the impact on poverty. So this is the total income effect. Now, so the poverty elasticity of the ith commodity, so there are two components. The income effect, where this is the income effect, and this is the distribution effect. And these components, you can calculate that how much is the income effect if there's no relative changes in relative prices, then you get income effect. But under the counterfactual, that there's no change in the relative prices. But if there's a change in relative prices, then it will impact the distribution impact. Now when ith price increases, this elasticity, the poverty elasticity also increases, because if any price increases, right, it will increase the poverty. Now, income effect, this measures that if there was counterfactual, where that all prices are, there's no changes in relative prices, all prices are increasing same proportion. So this will be the impact on the poverty. And this is the distribution impact that, if this distribution impact is positive, then there's a redistribution taking place, which increases poverty. So if this is positive, then ith price is anti-poor. And if this is negative, then it is pro-poor, then poverty is reducing. So from this, whether this is negative or positive, determines whether ith price is pro-poor or anti-poor. So this is a pro-poor index. Okay, if you divide this by this, you can capture the sign of this. So this is the pro-poor index, which I'm proposing, which is very useful for analyzing the GST rates, on different commodities. So if this pro-poor index is less than 1, then increase in ith prices hurt the poor proportionally less than the non-poor. So if phi is less than 1, then price increase in ith commodity is pro-poor. If it is greater than 1, then it is anti-poor. It will hurt the poor more than the non-poor. So this is a basic idea of pro-poor index. I mean, this can be applied anywhere. You can apply on prices, you can apply on GST rates. Whether poor are impacted or non-poor are impacted. So this is a very interesting sort of index, pro-poor index, which which can be easily calculated from surveys. So if government is determining the different, tax rates, for instance, many, governments who have value-added tax, they exempt food items because the food is consumed by the poor proportionally more than the non-poor. Other medical, say, for instance, education expense, supposing you want to educational, if you increase the price of education, we don't know whether it will hurt the poor or it will hurt the non-poor. So this index will let you know from the consumption patterns how much they are spending on education, the poor and non-poor families, So otherwise you cannot know it, if you, similarly health, health also, the health expenditure, is it pro-poor or anti-poor? Similarly, supposing the government wants to, many government services, for instance, in the transport, in health, in education, there's the user principle that government charges you some fee for utilizing that particular government service. Okay, so how should government determines the prices they charge to different consumers? So this will inform you how much they should charge for different services. There are, government provides many services, and how to determine the prices to be charged to people. For instance, this vaccine, supposing government is, providing vaccine to the population, one method is that give free vaccine to everybody, right? Okay. Another is that the poor should not pay money for the vaccine, only the rich pay. That way the government is putting a lot of money in buying the vaccines and, and implementing the use of vaccine. Then government can collect some revenue out of that. So this index will tell you whether the vaccine, how much they should charge, and for this service government is providing. Similarly, in education and anything, it can be applied. It's a very general index. Okay, next. That was the ex ante analysis, that you look at the FII and then make a decision, policy decision. But then I want to know ex post, that what is the total impact of prices. Now here you will see that this is the total impact on poverty. The prices have changed from PI to PI star. So this is the total change in poverty. And this is the income effect, that not the distribution impact, but income effect, because when this is under the counterfactual that there's no change in relative prices. So this is the income effect, and this is the distribution effect. So if this distribution effect is negative or positive, then all prices are pro-poor or anti-poor. So this is the overall impact of inflation, all prices, not before we were doing one price at a time, but now it is analyzing all prices, how they are impacting poverty. So from here, we can find out that overall impact of price changes is pro-poor, anti-poor. Okay. Now, this gives me the idea that should we have a different price index for the poor and non-poor, poor and the total average. So this is the PIP, the pro-poor index of the price index for the poor. Now, this index is derived very simple way, that under the assumption that all prices were uniformly increasing, that is pi is equal to lambda pi, yeah. Then substituting then, so this is so it results in the same percentage change in poverty as the given change in price vector from P to P star. That under the counterfactual, if all prices were increasing uniformly, then that will be the inflation rate. And so lambda is, we calculate such a way, it's similar to the idea of Atkinson's idea of equally distributed equivalent level of income. Here we are saying equally distributed uniform prices, no relative changes in relative prices. So you arrive at this pro-poor index for the poor, the price index for the poor. Now let's see. So this is the price index for the poor. And now you know the Lespier, what index number we use to measure inflation. The Lespier price index is the most popular in the world. Actually, in every country, whether rich or poor, they use Lespier price index. And Lespier price index is measured the impact of price changes on average consumer. Average, so one consumer, as if there's only one consumer in the economy. But now we are looking at, there are many consumers, poor and rich, right? So the PIP takes into account all the consumers, poor and non-poor. But Lespier index is only indexed for the average consumer. Now, if you compare the two, you can see that lambda is the PIP, and this is the Lespier price index, and this is the additional term, which determines whether it's pro-poor or not pro-poor. For instance, if phi I is greater than 1 for all I, or any I, then it will hurt the poor more than the non-poor. If phi I is less than 1, it will hurt the rich than the poor. So this is the additional, inflation rate. So this is interesting idea that if lambda, the PIP, is greater than L, which means that prices are hurting the poor more than the non-poor, because poor are facing higher inflation rates. But if this is negative, then other way around, that prices are hurting the rich more than the poor. So this is an interesting, that how much is the additional inflation rate suffered by the poor. So if concern, so we should actually, from policy point of view, most countries report, in India also, I think report Lespier price index when you have inflation rates. But my suggestion is that why not give the two index, lambda PIP and also Lespier price index. And then you can see the difference between the two, that how much additional inflation rate poor are suffering, So why can't they publish? No, this is very simple to calculate. You need only the weights in the beginning. And then you can present to the people, both indices, and then you can decide whether the prices are affecting the poor or the non-poor. I don't know. I mean, whole focus of the world is on Lespier price index, even in the rich advanced countries, So this is a new idea. This is an idea which I think will be very, very useful to present both these indicators of price indices. And they are very simple to compute. It's not complicated. It's not a rocket science, Now, going to indirect taxes, supposing there are n goods and services, when you have a GST, there are n goods and services. And T1, T2, these are the tax rates imposed on them, tax rates. So in actual practice, now when you put the tax rates, when you have a GST, so it will impact the prices because government is taking away money from the society, taking away the money. So somebody has to pay for that. Okay. So it is possible that all the price increases due to GST are passed on to consumers. That's one assumption. If all are passed on to consumer, or another is that nothing is passed on, only the producers bear the burden. Okay, but the real situation will be somewhere in between, right? That some of the price increase will be passed on to, the tax increase will be passed on to consumers, and some of it may be burden may be borne by the producer because they cannot sell the goods and services if they don't, So this is the price, the actual market price, and this is the price if there were no GST. And this will be the additional HIT. TI is the tax rate of the government is putting, and HI is what proportion of the price, if 1% increase in price, price is increased by 1 unit, then how much is HI? Is half, 50%, or 25%, and 20%. So it depends on the demand and supply. If highest commodity is a Lakshmi, is a necessity, say food items, then producers can pass on all of it to the consumers, because they have to consume, they have to buy, they cannot substitute. But if it is a luxury item, then they cannot easily pass it on to consumers. Some of it will be borne by the producers. So HI is determined by the demand and supply elasticity of the highest commodity. So now coming back, the impact of prices. So if you use this for different TI, you can get the, if you know the HI. I mean, HI is a very, it's difficult to consume because you have to have a demand and supply equation of every commodity, which is not feasible, right? So you can make some simple assumptions. For instance, if it's a very necessity, you can make a judgment that H will be, HI will be 1 for food, maybe 0.9. Similarly, if it is a luxury, then HI will be much less than 1. So you can make some assumptions, or you can estimate the demand and supply equation, and then you can easily see the impact on poverty of different tax rates. So this is the way I'm approaching, but I don't know, there will be many practical issues which you are more familiar with them. I'm not. So this will be the percentage increase if price of the highest commodity due to indirect taxes will be there. So if this is the elasticity of the price elasticity of the highest commodity, so this will be the total impact on poverty. So it will be a function of this elasticity, which you can calculate from the household surveys, and the initial prices before, and then this one you can assume HI, and then how much is the tax rates. So if you know a priori values of HI, you can calculate the impact on poverty. Okay, let me give you some illustration. These illustrations are I took from Brazil, and I had access to Brazilian data. So these 3 poverty measures: head count, poverty gap ratio, and severity of poverty. So this is the elasticity, that if price of the food goes up by 1%, then poverty will increase by 0.42%. And if non-food goes up by 1%, housing, the poverty will increase by 1.02%. And if all prices go up, then headcount ratio will increase by 1.44%. Now, you can ask me one simple question. How come, intuitively, when food prices goes up, then increase in poverty should be higher. But here, increase in poverty is 0.42, but if non-food prices go up, it is 1.02 increase in poverty, So you can ask me, why is it happening, It won't happen in the case of India, but it can happen in Brazil. Depends on how much proportion of your income goes into food. In Brazil is fairly rich, upper middle income country, where the food expenditure and the share of the total income is not that large compared to in India, and I don't know how much is in India. So that's why the non-food item, if prices go up, then poverty increases higher, because people are spending more money on non-food items in Brazil. But in India, proportionally, they are spending more on food items because India is much poorer than Brazil. Another interesting thing is that this is the pro-poor index. So you can see, pro-poor index is a real index which you should know whether price increase is pro-poor or anti-poor, not the actual poverty effect. Now here you can see that food index is 1.62, which means that food price goes up, the poor are more adversely impacted. They are hurt more. But if non-food price goes up, the poor are not hurt that much. The index is 0.86, right? And similarly, housing, clothing is, quite high impact on poverty. The 1.24, transport is 0.46, health is 0.68, and so on. So the total impact, pro-poor index should be 1. Okay. So similarly here, now if you go along this, you can see that pro-poor index, the impact on poverty keeps increasing as you go from headcount to poverty gap ratio and severity of poverty. Why it is increasing? Because when you have a higher level of poverty, say severity of poverty, you are giving a lot of weights to the very poor. Weight changes compared to headcount ratio. And similarly, poverty gap, is somewhere in between. So you can see that if food prices goes up, the headcount goes up 0.42, poverty gap goes up by 0.56 and 0.65 severity of poverty, which means that price increases are affecting extreme poor, ultra poor more than the average, than the average, not the ultra poor, than other poor. So that is the interpretation. Similarly, that pro-poor index keeps going up, 1.62, 1.77, 1.8, which means that price of food is impacting extreme poor much more than the poor. But situation is different when you have food price increases, it's 0.82, so it keeps declining, So this is a sort of application, and this gives you fairly good idea how the prices are impacting. And not only prices are impacting the poor, but how much they are impacting the poor and ultra poor or extremely poor. Okay. Similarly, this is a total effect. from 99 to 2001, 2001 to 2, 3, these are different years, but this is the total for all years from 99 to 2006. So this is the total impact. So total impact. So this is the, as I told you, income effect and distribution effect. So you can see that here, the total change in prices, the total change affecting is 91.93, of which income effect is so much and distribution effect is so much. So, but if you see here that distribution effect, our poverty effect is much more severe on extremely poor. So the prices are impacting the extreme poor much more in Brazil. The huge, significantly affecting the extreme poor than the. So this is very useful information, I think, to the policymakers. Now, PIP, the PIP, you can present the both. So this is the Lespier index. These are the different weights you give, because these are the elasticity weights as I discussed. So let me go to the next one. Here you can see that Lespier index is 59.86%. Between 99 and 2006, the prices increased by about 60%. Okay. But if you have a PIP for headcount ratio, they increase by 63%, 64%, 64.4%, which means that poor are more impacted. In Brazil, the impact of prices on poor has been significantly higher than the average consumer. Lespier is the average consumer, and an extreme poor suffers greater hurt from the increase in prices. So this is the illustration from Brazil, but I'll be happy to see if somebody is applying this technology to Indian situation. This will be very useful to know for the policymakers how the impact of prices on poverty takes place. So let me now conclude that. So as I pointed out, that people have different consumption patterns. So impact of the prices on poor and non-poor will be very different. And how to measure this, I've illustrated that. And GST, that many developing countries, they collect a large proportion of their revenue from indirect taxes, which have impact on prices. So you can calculate how much is the impact on that. And then, as I pointed out, that government provides many services: health, education, utility, transportation, and housing, maybe many other services. How to determine the prices they charge so that the poor are least impacted by these price charges, So the pro-poor index can help to determine these prices. But point I'm making is that most of the countries have central banks, Reserve Bank, the Reserve Bank of India. The role of these banks, central banks, is to monitor inflation rates. That if inflation rate goes out of the band, they increase the interest rate, or they, reduce the credit to the banks and all that. So that's the way they stabilize the impact of inflation on the economy. Now, a lot of efforts have gone, a lot of debates goes on, but this debate does not take place how these prices are impacting the poor and non-poor. Enormous energies are going using the Lespier price index, which is the price index of an average consumer. But no society and no country has ever talked about the central bank also should be concerned about the impact on prices on the people, poor or non-poor. And Brazilian experience has shown that impact of inflation on living conditions of poor can be significantly higher than the average. So the primary focus of aggregate inflation in macroeconomic policy must change. That's my policy recommendation. And then I have talked about PIP. And then also third, so I'm suggesting that the NSOs, as statistical offices, they should present both indices so that there can be a public debate about the prices and their impact on poverty. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Kakwani. I think most of us were taken back to our postgraduate classes and we found that there is a lot more relevance to what we taught, what we were taught in our postgraduate classes when you were trying to break open the price effect into income effect and the distribution effect. And I felt that it is what you have presented is immensely useful to our context, particularly in GIFT, where some of my colleagues are working on the impact of GST on consumption and prices. And your postulates based on the Brazilian experience. That's a very good pointer for us to kind of take this agenda forward. I'm very sure my colleagues will be interacting with you. So I'm sure they will be having clarifications, questions. So the floor is now open. Yeah. This is the mic here, right?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, hello. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
Parma Chakravarti. I'm an assistant professor in Gulati Institute of Finance and Taxation. So I was just thinking about the distribution effect. So the way we describe the income effect and substitution effect from the price effects, like we decompose the price effect. So we have income effect and the substitution effect. And when we are talking about substitution effect, we are basically looking at the effect of the relative price, the change in the relative price. So how are we looking at the distribution effect through the price effect? I mean, is it not related to the income effect? So I was just thinking that. So that is one of the question. And the second question that I have is related to the price equation, where you have so introduced the price equation as the price of ayat commodity in the absence of indirect tax. Plus, you have also introduced two taxes. So one is the tax rate. T is the tax rate, and HI you have we have this proportion of indirect tax. So I was not very sure like what exactly it means, like proportion of indirect tax on the ayat commodity and then multiplied with the tax rate. So if you can just enlighten us regarding this equation. So I could not actually understand this equation. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this idea of decomposition, which I presented, poverty decomposition, it's similar to Slutsky equation. Slutsky equation, famous Slutsky equation, where you have income effect and the substitution effect when any price changes. But here, I'm talking about the distribution effect. When there's there's income effect when price of the highest commodity increases, right? Poverty increases. So that poverty increase consists of income effect, because any price increases, will increase the poverty as long as the prices are increasing uniformly. But the distribution effect is that poor can substitute, that if, for instance, if they have, price increases, for instance, coffee and tea, that if price of coffee increases, then people can substitute tea, right? So it's the empirical question. So here I'm calling it as a distribution effect, that when highest price goes up, right, there's income effect, and also there's a redistribution, that poor can reduce their increase in poverty by moving to some other commodities, who are substitutes, So there's a distribution effect, so general, I have explained in a general distribution way. I mean, consumer theory is very difficult to calculate substitution effect, but this is much simpler idea of redistribution effect, that it's a very simple idea that redistribution takes place because of relative price changes. So if redistribution takes place in the favor of the poor, then it's pro-poor. If it takes place against the poor, this is anti-poor. And about the second point, HI, HI. I mean, when price GST, for instance, the price of the highest, government imposes tax on highest commodities, right? Supposing government imposes tax on food, right? Food item. So what happens is that if food is a necessity, right, then producers won't care, because they can sell any amount, that poor people cannot substitute, right? So the producers can pass on everything to the consumers, that then HI will be equal to 1, okay? They can pass it on. But if it's a luxury item, right, the people can substitute from one item to another item, then they don't have incentive to pass it on all that prices. So some of the burden is borne by the producers and some is borne by the consumers. Some of it they pass it on and some they don't pass it on. So HI is determined by the demand and supply, right? But that's very difficult, because in practical situation, if you are doing, research and, on GST and all that, it's very difficult for you to go and estimate the demand and supply equations. It's not that very easy, So my suggestion is that you can make some common sense, assumptions, some common sense assumptions. For instance, it's an absolute necessity. For instance, grains are, what are the most, inferior goods, then you can assume that all of HI will be 1. And if it is, luxury items, then HI will be, if absolute luxury, then HI will be 0. All the, tax will be borne by the producers. So HI, I can't tell you how to estimate it, because but you can make some common sense assumptions when you are undertaking any, GST study in your institute.
I have some question. I have a question, not essentially on the decomposition or a specific question of this particular distribution question. What I'm concerned about is, what is your intuition, especially having studied Brazil. Brazil is, of course, you have got almost 70% of the population living in Sao Paulo. And it's not, though it's a geographically dispersed country, it's not so much. But in case of India, in a highly diversified economy like ours, what is your intuition in terms of having uniform rates, across different regions, sections, sectors? What's your intuition about it?
I don't have much intuition about India, but let me try to answer your question that whether, simplest tax will be that you have a uniform tax. Every item, consumption item, is taxed at the same rate, right? Same rate. Then actually the problem of, the redistribution effect will become zero because all prices will increase by uniformly, and tax will be very simple way, is simple. So the entire impact on poverty will be income effect. The distribution effect will disappear if all the taxes are uniform, right? But if you don't have a uniform taxes, then there will be, distribution effect, right? And there can also be efficiency issue, the distortion, when you have, when you are fiddling with the relative prices, there's a distortion in the economy, So these are the practical issues, that how much distortion you are prepared to accept, because if you have a uniform tax, which means that poor and non-poor both are paying the similar, so there is no question of, so that is very difficult question to answer you, that what you are. But some countries, I don't know India's situation, but some people, some food items which are consumed by very poor, in Western countries, they use cassava. India, what is the item, from NSS data, you can get the, which are the commodities, which, so you can exempt some of the commodities, instead of, one by one, every tax, which will becomes very complicated to tax collections and all that, because there'll be a lot of administrative costs involved in that, So you have to make a judgment about that some commodities you exempt from GST, and tax only, and uniformly the other commodities. Another, maybe supposing you want to, promote health, that everybody, for instance, okay, your vaccine, for instance, you can exempt from that, GST on vaccine, because you want everybody to get vaccine, otherwise, everybody will suffer, So that is my intuition is that there's a lot of judgment to be used. So
It's
I'm
done that way,
presenting
in
the
fact.
techniques which can help you to make such judgment,
Right.
but it's not 100% accurate, right? It cannot be.
Yeah.
But it helps you to make a proper judgment, evidence-based policies you can make.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm Anita Kumari. I'm Associate Professor at GIT. I have two questions. One is, would you please explain the role of subsidy in your proper index? The first one. The second one is, even without the change in tax rates, the prices of commodities are changing. So how will we, address that issue? And one more thing is, in your proper index, the total impact in all the cases, all the three situations, that is in headcount and others, are similar. Is there any justification for that? These are the three questions I would like to ask.
Maybe if you can repeat one by one rather than three at a time.
Okay, sure.
Time
The
to
first one
think
is,
about it.
okay, sir. The first question is, the role of subsidy in the proper index, how will you address that thing now, whether
Yeah,
there is
okay.
any reduction?
Okay.
Because the government is giving so much subsidy, especially for the poverty alleviation. Then how we will incorporate this in the proper index? That's the first
Yeah.
one.
Okay, let me answer that. I think that is very simple. I mean, that's a good question. And that is, simple to answer because subsidies you treat same way as the tax, right? Only the sign changes. Only the sign changes. Okay. So, for instance, if you are providing agricultural subsidy, then you should look at it, the pro-poor index for those items which are subsidized, right? And if you are giving subsidies, the poverty will reduce. But here, when you are putting GST, poverty increases. So exactly, it is very symmetric. The two things are very symmetric, and same methodology can be applicable, to subsidies. So maybe it's a good question. I should have pointed out in my concluding remarks that this model can also handle subsidies.
On the
You are-
increases, especially this pandemic and that catastrophic conditions, then government is involving more in providing different types of subsidies, food subsidy and health subsidy. So many type of subsidies are providing.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, you are vaccine, you are providing subsidies to vaccine also. That is a subsidy, and that will have impact on poverty, So yeah, I mean, subsidies are very important components of, I mean, GST is a very bad, the government collects the money, but in subsidies, government pays the money, It's like a positive and negative income tax, exactly the similar idea. What is your third question?
Sir, the second question is, even without change in without change in tax rate, there is possibility of increasing prices of many commodities because
Yeah.
of so many other. Then how will incorporate that
I
thing?
mean, yeah, I mean, prices are changing whether there's a GST or no GST, right? Prices are changing every day, I mean, everybody faces the increases in prices, right? So what you do is that you can do ex ante analysis and ex post analysis. Ex ante, you can see that if the prices of particular commodity goes up by so much, you are observing that, right? Then how do you help, who are impacted by this, and then how government can help them so that they can maintain the same utility, okay? So this analysis goes beyond GST, beyond the taxation. It is all any price changes. The price changes are, prices are increasing. India faced a lot of price increases, a few years ago. So that had enormous impact on people's lives, And then how to determine who are the people, how much they are impacted, how much the poverty changes because of these price changes, right? I also showed you that different quintiles, and people belonging to different deciles, you can calculate the impact on their real income, But apart from that, you can also extend this analysis to social groups, There are social groups, for instance, supposing because when the government provides subsidies, right? Whom they provide the subsidies? They say, okay, we provide subsidies to these social groups. Say we provide subsidies to scheduled castes, scheduled tribe. In Brazil, I was studying, for instance, they provide the subsidies to blacks and whites, blacks, So the social groups which you think are very poor. And so you can calculate using this methodology how much is the impact on social groups, right? Okay, and then you can target the social groups, for policies. Okay, that these social groups are impacted over a period of 1 year. These people have suffered so much drop in the real income, then how to compensate their social groups, you know. So that this is a very powerful methodology that you can target the social groups and calculate the price index for the social groups. Any social groups you can calculate, you know, that how the prices are impacting different groups. I mean, data are available. What are the deprived social groups in India? I mean, I can think of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, but also urban and rural, you know. These are the two social groups, you know, people living in urban area and rural area. The prices impact them differently, you know, right? So you can calculate the impact on poverty among these different social groups. So that can be done. For India, I think the NSS has a lot of information about social groups. But also, I suggest, if I may, that you can apply this technology at state level, different states, you know, that how the people living in different states are impacted by the price changes, right? Their poverty, how much poverty is impacted by the price changes. And then you can do something about it, you know, that if the states are very, you know, adversely impacted by the prices, then government can transfer, you know, additional resources to those states, you know, and how much they should transfer, my methodology can tell you that. Okay.
Is it over?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, are there any questions from the friends logged in online? Floor is now open for those who have the online participants.
Yeah, sir. Can I ask a question?
But please go ahead.
I'm Ramalingam. Sir, I am Ramalingam from Gulati Institute. Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. So this is a very, I'm not from an economics background, but I'm from a commerce and management background. I have a small question regarding your that prices. In India, when GST is implemented, I will take a one commodity, that's cement. The effective rate of, cement. Cement is supposed to be a very important commodity for a building material, you know that.
Yeah.
So cement, the rate of tax at the manufacturing level as well as in the state VAT level, effective rate is something 33.5% when we combine. So after the introduction of GST, the rate has been given as a single rate. You know that GST is a combination of 12 taxes. So after that, after the introduction of GST, the rate was reduced to 28%. That means if all the from the manufacturing down to the retailer, if all the persons effectively and passes that credit to the lower people, the consumer would have received a 4% less in the price, maybe in the first initial years. But this doesn't happen here. Rather, price has increased, maybe at least by 2 to 3%. Maybe a not passing of input tax credit, maybe not because of a lot of not awareness about the tax credit issues, etc., etc. In that situation, when a person started doing some kind of research saying that because of the implementation of GST, the price has increased based on some mathematical calculations, can we come to a conclusion like that? Logically, it is a problem of not passing the credit. But when you apply the mathematical calculations, we may come to a conclusion that the price has increased. So what way an economist may be able to give an answer for this issue? Logically, it is a problem of non-awareness, not passing, maybe some unknowingly and unknowingly, some of the manufacturers, wholesalers, stockists have not passed that credit to the subsequent dealers, and finally it is not passed to the consumer. So when you take the figures, you will end up in a higher where price increase due to GST. But price has not price increase not because of the GST. Actually, GST has reduced the rate. Sir, yes, sir, your comment on.
Yeah, I can see your point that supposing government on some commodity increases the price by say 20%. Huh? But that increase in price of 20%, ultimate result may be price increases by 30%.
Yeah, more than the effect you are telling. Okay, right.
Yeah, more than the government is collecting the money.
Yeah, right. The same. Okay, right.
So this is, I think, this is the implementation problem.
No, I want to know, is there some kind of calculation procedures or some models is there to?
I don't know, but I think your institute is the most,
Yeah, right. We want your insights on this.
Implementation.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, point is the implementation is a very difficult issue. I mean, even in a developed country like Australia here,
Yeah.
there is some, that some enterprises, they collect GST from the consumers and then don't give it to the government.
Yeah, the same. Yeah, right. The same.
That also happens,
Right. They collect and don't. It is happening in Kerala also. It happened in India also.
Yeah. So I don't know. These are very difficult. I mean, it's very complex issues.
Yeah, collecting and not paying, and right.
Yeah, I mean, and also another thing which I didn't talk about is the administration cost. Because the government is collecting money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a leaky bucket.
Yeah, right.
That when you are carrying a water, if there's a leak, the water is going away. So similarly, the government is collecting money, and some of the money is leaked out. Some is going into administrative costs, the paying the salaries and all that, the people who are monitoring.
But sir, I can give you some interesting one in Kerala. When I don't know about how far your theory will support that. The price of liquor for the last 1 year has increased by almost by 50%. But the consumption has also increased. Even so, there is no price effect on liquor also here. So when the prices increases, consumption of the liquor is also started increasing here. So price has no effect on the consumption of liquor in Kerala. I mean, not in Kerala, in some other states also. So that is also an effect we are raising here.
Yeah, I mean, that is possible because if price increases, when we know economists say that other things remaining constant.
Other things, ceteris paribus. Yeah.
But if other things are not constant, right? Supposing people's income is increasing quite rapidly. So if price is increasing, the consumption can even increase,
Yeah,
so
right.
that is possible.
Yes.
Because we economists always make the assumption that other things remaining constant. Yeah.
So thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions, clarifications, remarks? Yeah, please give the mic.
Hello, sir. Hello. Sir, while you were going through your presentation, one thing was constantly, because see, in developing country situation, direct taxation is a very difficult issue because we cannot collect money through direct taxation, and indirect tax becomes the base of the government's collection mechanism. Now, if we think of something like this, that, okay, we accept this scenario that we will never be able to collect direct taxes in the way developed countries are doing. Let's have a very high indirect taxes for the brackets of commodity, which are generally consumed by, upper quantiles of the population, and make direct transfers to relatively poor population. Will it be a sustainable model, given these kind of technological innovation that you have already given us, that we can estimate all these things nowadays. And we have household surveys and things like that. Can we think of a system like that?
I mean, we have welfare programs, social welfare programs, where the government makes transfers to the poor, right? Or maybe very poor social groups, So maybe that when you have high indirect taxes, so this methodology will tell you how much different groups are impacted by it. And then you can design how much subsidy, how much cash transfer government can give. So this my methodology is telling you how much is the real income effect of price changes on different groups, from different deciles, quintiles, or even different social. I think it's easier to target social groups, maybe easier to target states, the states and, different states, will suffer different increases, the different effect from GST. So it will be useful for you to do study. And using this methodology doesn't answer all your questions, but it can, help you to make better judgment about the policies. But you can have it, I mean, income tax. But what about corporate tax? That is a direct tax. Governments collect a lot of money from the corporate tax. What about property tax? Property you cannot hide. Property you cannot hide, right? Okay. I mean, income tax is more difficult, but there are other taxes. And then actually, I mean, this also tells you the different impacts of different types of taxes, how much they impact, you can calculate, I mean, I've done a lot of work on progressivity and all that, you can do that. I mean, the indirect taxes have a direct impact on prices, but there are other taxes. Maybe even the corporate tax can have an impact on prices. But how to link the two is very difficult, So you you have a lot of issues to look at it.
Okay.
Institute can do that.
No, we were checking these are issues. Are these the real issues? That's. I think if there are, if there are any questions from the, okay. So then I will request Dr. Sakaria to say the word of thanks.
So this is my formal, kind of word of thanks, but this is basically a process of fruition of, a discussion that was initiated back in 2017, when I actually started working in Sydney. Then I started having discussion with Professor Nanak Kakwani about these issues. And finally, we are here we have started some conversation. And I think this is just the beginning. We will continue to converse, and we will have more one-to-one, conversation with other faculty members as well. So thank you very, very much, sir, for agreeing to be a constant source of guidance and inspiration, and guiding our students as well. I know that I've already talked to you about this, that individual students might be interested in contacting you. So thank you very much, sir, for agreeing, not just for this lecture, but also constantly being in touch with us. And we value this association quite a lot. Regarding this particular organization of the lecture, there are a few, very important elements that are involved in this process. So first of all, in this, online world without technological support. We cannot, do it. And our, IT team here with Varun and Abhilash and others, they are constantly, helping us with this kind of thing. So thank you very much for this, smooth functioning of this session. And of course, our seminar coordinators who are here, Anup and Anita, they have been constantly following me with all kinds of requirements that is needed to complete the process of seminar. And finally, I would like to, convey my thanks and regards to all the participants and students of GIFT who have been, sitting in the lobby of online lobby to attend your lecture. And I'm sure that, a lot of classroom conversation will come up based on today's, lecture. And I think this is continuation of the lecture that I started on microeconomics on utility function. So I think there is a lot more discussion that is due after this particular lecture. Thank you very much, sir.
I mean, you can share my PowerPoint with people.
Yeah, I will share the full paper if you permit me, sir. If those who are interested in reading.
Ah,
The PowerPoint is fine.
I will.
With your permission.
No,
It is
PowerPoint
not
is-
yet published.
Okay, I mean, I don't know because I'm going to put a lot of material in my forthcoming
I
book.
think PowerPoint will be enough. Do not article can be circulated later.
Yeah,
PowerPoint,
circulate
if
the,
you can share, that'll be nice. That'll be enough.
because chapter is still preliminary. I'm,
Ah.
is forthcoming by Oxford University Press. So,
That's fine.
hmm,
No, that's okay. Come on.
because the Oxford University Press might object, that.
Huh,
release
don't
it.
worry about that. I think PowerPoint will be good
PowerPoint is
enough
fine.
for
No
because
problem, you can share.
the whole argument is you. I mean, you have put your PowerPoint in such an elaborate manner that's very clear. So I think those who want to learn and raise questions further could make use of that. Thank you from our
I
side.
should be grateful if Zakaria can upload this lecture on YouTube and then it can be available.
It's
to
on the
everybody.
Facebook and you. It is already there.
Uh-huh.
Thank you very much. Thank you once again. We look forward to having more close interaction with you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mhm.